I walked through the glass entry of the Pendleton estate, already knowing I'd either made the smartest decision of my life or a huge mistake. The grand doors opened before me, and the polished floor gleamed under chandeliers I could have sworn were worth more than my entire house. Marla Pendleton's expression shifted the second she saw me, that polite little snarl rich people wear when they think they're doing you a favor by letting you breathe their air. Her eyes scanned my off-the-rack blazer, scuffed boots, and the 2009 Tacoma keys in my hand, like I'd tracked gravel in on a nice rug. She leaned toward Lydia, my girlfriend, and whispered loud enough for me to catch, "He looks like a vendor who took the wrong door." I didn't flinch. Maybe she wanted to see me squirm, but I'd been holding on to a truth for 18 months now, one I hadn't shared with Lydia. I run a quiet industrial automation shop and a software consultancy. My take-home averages about $41,800 a month. But Lydia thinks I'm just some maintenance lead who gets by. I've let her think that because it's not just about money. It's about what people don't see, what they assume. My grandfather raised me lean, taught me to value simple things, and to watch how people act when they think you can't do a damn thing for them. So I came dressed down on purpose, hoping to run the test. The Pendletons, dealership owners with their smiles and teeth, measuring me by what I could spend, not who I am. Dinner stretched on like a parade of silverware and fake laughs. The clink of glasses and polite chatter filled the air, but I could tell where the real focus was. Marla's eyes never left me, calculating, as if she could sniff out the smallest flaw in my resume. Every question she asked about my background felt like a drill, each answer slipping through her fingers like sand. Nothing good enough. Lydia, sitting beside me, said nothing. Her eyes slid off me when the talk turned to money, like she couldn't wait for the subject to change. It was a move I'd seen before, that quiet retreat whenever things got real. Douglas Pendleton, the father, shook my hand like he was sealing a deal, his palm cold and flat against mine. The handshake lasted just long enough to remind me that he saw me as nothing more than an asset to be weighed, judged, and measured. Sloane, Lydia's older sister, gave me a look that made it clear I was no better than a pothole to her, a nuisance to drive around if necessary. And then, as if the conversation needed more tension, someone dropped Evan Castellano into the mix. Lydia's old flame, the one she never talked about, but who her family seemed to adore. His family ran Castellano Imports, and supposedly he was doing incredibly well these days. I forced a smile, nodding as the name bounced around the table. My stomach tightened. Evan Castellano. Even his name sounded like a threat, a way for them to measure my worth against some shiny, perfect image. Excusing myself to the restroom was the only way to escape the air in that room without causing a scene. As I passed the study, I noticed the door was slightly ajar, the soft murmur of voices cutting through the crack. I could have walked away, pretended I didn't hear anything, but curiosity dragged me closer. Marla's voice, sharp and fast, bounced off the walls. "The dealerships are over-leveraged. The manufacturer is rethinking the franchise," she said. Her tone clipped like she was discussing inventory. Sloane's voice followed, more desperate than I expected. "We need the Castellano deal," she said, her words slithering in the air. "Evan's family will save us. Just need Lydia to stay with him long enough to close it." It hit me hard. The plan was laid out right in front of me, clear as day. Keep Lydia positioned with Evan until they could lock down the Castellano investment. Use me as some temporary decoy to throw everyone off the scent. Once the deal was done, they'd stage a breakup, some story that would make me look unfit. Easy to dismiss, easy to throw away. I stood there, frozen, hearing every word in my chest, that heat rising up. It wasn't heartbreak, not yet, but the anger, slow, steady, burned in my gut. I wasn't a placeholder, some piece in their game. I was real, and I wasn't their backup plan. Not now, not ever. I didn't move, didn't make a sound. I just let the door fall close behind me, the echo of their words ringing in my ears. When I turned, I could feel the weight of what I knew now. I had no illusions left about Lydia's family, but the real question was, what would I do with it? Back in the sitting room, the furniture had been shifted, the lights softened. It was showtime. Douglas Pendleton cleared his throat and raised his glass for a toast, and Lydia pulled me forward like I was some prize she was unveiling. She flashed a shiny ring that looked big under the soft lighting, but I could see the cheapness in the edges. It wasn't the kind of ring you'd get for a lifetime commitment. It was a performance piece. The crowd hushed, their eyes on us. Lydia's hand slid into mine, a little too tight, like she was afraid I might bolt right there in front of everyone. Her voice was soft but eager. "Curtis, will you marry me?" My gut told me to walk, to pull away, leave that house and never look back. But then I remembered what Marla had planned. Get me committed in public, then break me down later. They'd trap me in front of all these people, turn me into the fool. Fine. If they wanted a stage, I'd give them one. But it wouldn't be the one they imagined. "I do," I said, because what else was there to say? The room erupted in applause, as if they'd just witnessed something profound, something they could sell. I smiled, but my teeth didn't meet the edges of my mouth. The ring felt heavy in my hand, not because of the metal, but because I knew exactly what it was meant to represent. As I glanced around, I spotted Victor Hale, the silver-haired guest who'd been hanging around, watching me like he was trying to place my face. We shook hands, his grip firm, his eyes studying me, like he'd seen me somewhere before, but couldn't put it together. He held on a second too long, just long enough for me to file him away. A family friend of the Pendletons, a man who'd been in the room longer than I had. I could tell he knew something, maybe not all of it, but enough to make him suspicious. Lydia squeezed my hand again for the photographers, making sure the shots looked right. It was all about the image, about making this look like something real, but I wasn't buying it. The ring still felt wrong in my palm, a symbol of everything I didn't want to be. I left that night with the ring Lydia had pressed into my hand tucked in my pocket, my jaw set, and the taste of something sharp in the back of my throat. Monday morning, I clocked into my shop like any other day. 7 trucks, 11 techs, 2 coders, all of us running the usual grind. I didn't have time for drama, not yet. Not with the kind of work I had waiting for me. I spent my days managing the team, checking in on projects. But when the shop closed at night, that's when the real work started. I dug into the Pendleton Auto Group's filings, public records, vendor accounts, anything I could find. The picture started to get ugly quick. They had expanded too fast in 2020 and 2021, trying to cash in on the boom, but it wasn't sustainable. Debt piled on top of debt, missed quarterly targets 3 times in a row. The manufacturer was starting to put pressure on them to clean up their act, but it was already too late. I wasn't looking for a smoking gun, not yet, but I kept pushing deeper, pulling at threads. Expense reports, vendor shells, charity invoices. As soon as I dug into the numbers, Sloane's name started showing up in some odd places. Travel training expenses, paid to places with beaches, consulting fees routed through a P.O. box that didn't lead anywhere useful. Luxury invoices funneled through their marketing accounts. It was starting to make sense. Sloane was skimming from somewhere, and it was all right in front of me. I mapped transfers across 4 accounts, different banks, different names, but there was a pattern to the way the money moved. It wasn't big at first, just rounding errors, split charges, funny timing. But over 5.5 years, it crept up to over $380,000. Nothing blatant enough to raise flags immediately, but enough for me to start drawing the picture. Then there was Victor Hale. The guy had lost a contract years ago when the Pendletons undercut him in a shady reallocation deal. Nothing illegal, technically, just ugly. Enough that he'd been waiting for a chance to take a swing back. I knew that look when I saw it. He was just waiting for the right moment to strike. Victor and I met at a diner off the highway one evening. The place had a sign out front that hadn't been updated in years. The kind of spot where you could grab a coffee and talk without anyone asking too many questions. He slid a manila folder across the table, and I handed him my own stack of ledgers. He had memos, vendor emails, and a contact number for the regional manufacturer rep. I brought dates, amounts, authorizations, all of it annotated, page after page. "I've been keeping an eye on them for a while," he said, tapping his fingers on the table, his voice low. "These guys play dirty, but there's a way to hit back without getting caught." I nodded. This wasn't about revenge for me. This was about making sure they didn't walk all over people like me, people who worked for a living and got shit on, just because some family thought they could buy their way out of anything. Victor slid a piece of paper over to me with the rep's contact information, then added, "When you're ready, this guy can be your in, but don't move too fast. He'll need time to trust you." I filed away the new piece of the puzzle and didn't say much else. The meeting was short, purposeful, and clean. He was as professional as I expected. No small talk, no bullshit. Back at my desk, I started on another project. This one wasn't about the Pendletons or Victor or any of the money I'd tracked. This one was about Lydia. I started a folder with her name on it. It wasn't about revenge either, not exactly. It was about knowing where I stood, about finding the truth before it found me. I pulled her call logs, looked at calendar overlaps with Evan Castellanos events. Same restaurant twice a week, the same client dinner that happened to line up with his fundraiser. Nothing too glaring yet, but I didn't jump to conclusions. I wasn't that guy, not yet. Just timestamps, just details, one piece of a larger puzzle. I was patient. I'd let the pieces fall where they would. The truth had a way of making itself clear, and when it did, it wouldn't need to be shouted. It'd be loud enough on its own. It was a Thursday night when I parked across from the steakhouse Lydia had called a team mixer. I'd been there before, a quiet spot where people in her world went to feel important. I didn't need to walk in. I knew what I was looking for. 10 minutes later, Lydia stepped inside, looking like she belonged. And then Evan Castellano slid in beside her. They didn't even pretend to make it subtle. They took a corner booth, knees brushing, hands touching, small, intimate gestures that said everything. I didn't barge in. I didn't need to. Instead, I stood across the street, tucked in the shadows, taking photos through the reflection in the glass. A little kiss when they thought the waiter was blocking their view. I kid you not. It wasn't even something I had to sneak to catch. They were so careless about it. I didn't feel rage, not right then. Just this quiet numbness, like the truth had settled in my gut, and there was no point pretending anymore. I went home after that, stared at the photos. The confirmation hit me hard, not because of what I saw, hell, I'd suspected, but because of the way Lydia acted like she could still sell this lie to me, still pretend like nothing had changed. But it wasn't just about me, was it? It wasn't about some broken promise or a broken heart. It was about how they saw everyone, how they treated people they thought they could control, people they thought they could buy off, string along, use up. And that's what hurt the most, realizing I was never meant to be anything but another pawn. The next morning, I called Victor. He picked up right away. Got the meeting scheduled, he said. Tuesday, 10 a.m. at that diner, be ready. I told him I was ready. I've got something that'll make it bulletproof, I added, my fingers already digging into more files. I wasn't messing around anymore. By the time I hung up, I'd gone through procurement emails, tracked part shortages, and warranty chargebacks that were padded like a mattress. Sloane's name showed up in routing notes, tied to a preferred consultant, who, surprise, turned out to be her own company. I wasn't going to let that go unnoticed. That night, Lydia came over, all smiles, already shifting into engagement party mode. She talked about the guest list, champagne brands, the quartet they had hired, all the details she had already planned for a party that wasn't even real. She spoke like nothing had changed, like she hadn't been out with someone else just the night before. I sat there listening, watching her smile. She didn't know it, but I was already miles past her now. I wasn't going to tip my hand, not yet. I nodded as she talked, watched her hands move as she outlined how the day would go, how we would do this, how we would do that. I could feel the sharpness in her words, the cracks forming under all that fake enthusiasm. But I didn't interrupt. I didn't react. I let her believe she had control over the situation, and when she was done, I said nothing. 3 Saturdays later, white tents popped up on the Pendleton lawn like mushrooms after a rainstorm. I drove in as usual, my old Tacoma rumbling up the long driveway, the engine's growl cutting through the quiet. I handed the valet my key without a second thought and walked toward the entrance in a suit from my other closet, the one with actual tailoring. It was a far cry from the off-the-rack blazer I'd worn the first night. When I stepped into the party, I could feel the shift before I even saw it. Marla's eyes froze on me as soon as I walked in. I knew what she saw. The watch, limited run, something I'd bought myself after a tough contract, and the old signet ring from my grandfather. I could practically hear her mind recalculating, doing the math like a spreadsheet that just updated. Her brain couldn't make sense of it. Guests I recognized from filings, names I'd seen attached to the Pendleton Group's shaky finances, started whispering after introductions. The regional rep from the manufacturer, 2 competing auto dealership owners, even a journalist who covered the retail side of the industry. They didn't even try to hide it. The whispers followed me like a trail of smoke. Lydia found me a few minutes later, and the first thing she said was, "Why didn't you wear our look?" I smiled, but there was no warmth behind it. I wore mine. Her expression didn't change, but her eyes shifted, narrowing just slightly as if she was calculating something in her head. The math was adding up in ways she didn't want to see, but I wasn't about to give her an easy answer. Victor slipped by me as I circulated through the crowd, his gaze sharp but casual. "The rep's ready if you are," he murmured, just loud enough for me to hear. I nodded, keeping my face neutral. There was no rush, no need to make a spectacle of it. I moved from group to group, letting the right people connect the name on my invoices to the guy standing in front of them. It wasn't loud or brash. I didn't need to make any announcements. I just let the whispers do their work. Then, Marla cornered me by the bar. She wasn't smiling, not like before. The polite, icy mask had dropped, and I could see the question burning in her eyes. "What game are you running, Curtis?" I didn't hesitate. "My grandfather taught me to see who people are when they think you can't help them." She didn't like that answer one bit. Her jaw tightened, her fingers tapping the edge of her drink. The thin veneer of civility cracked for a moment, and I could see the real Marla, the one who only knew how to play things on her terms. But I wasn't playing her game anymore. She didn't respond, just stood there, staring at me like I'd pulled the rug out from under her. It wasn't about me trying to embarrass her. It was about showing her that I wasn't some background character in her story. And she hated that. She hated that I wasn't impressed with her family's empire, that I wasn't falling for the act. I didn't stick around to see how she'd process it. Instead, I turned my attention back to the conversation swirling around me. The quiet tension thick in the air. The pieces were falling into place. They just didn't know it yet. Douglas tapped the mic to get everyone's attention. The sound of it pinged through the room, sharp and final. Marla stood beside him, smiling like a snake in a garden, her eyes scanning the crowd with that same fake warmth. She started speaking about legacy, about our future. She dropped hints about a strategic alliance coming soon. The crowd leaned in, eager for the next piece of the puzzle. I could see it in their eyes. They thought they knew how this would go. And then she called us to the stage. Lydia stepped forward with her hand locked in mine, the crowd clapping politely as we made our way to the front. I could feel their eyes on us, sizing us up, like they were all in on a joke that I didn't get. When I took the mic, I glanced over at Marla, still smiling, still the picture of control, and I spoke into the crowd. "Thank you for inviting a maintenance guy into royalty," I said, my voice clear, no hesitation. The crowd chuckled, a nervous ripple of laughter. But I wasn't done yet. I cleared my throat, letting the tension settle before I hit them with the truth. I came dressed down the first night to see character. The room went still, the kind of quiet that only happens when people realize they're not in control of the moment. I heard something too, something Marla didn't think I would. I quoted her line, the one about me being a vendor who took the wrong door. The laughter died, faces went pale. I didn't name names, didn't need to, but I could see Marla's jaw tighten. She tried to recover, but the damage was done. I kept going. What I didn't hear was the rest of the plan. How I was supposed to be a placeholder while you courted Evan Castellano for a bailout. All this time, I thought I was the future, your future. Turns out, I was just the decoy. I pulled out 2 photos, simple, clear, damning. The dates and timestamps were there for anyone who cared to look. I showed the first one. Lydia and Evan, laughing, sitting too close at a table in that restaurant. The next one, them again. A kiss hidden behind the waiter's arm. I didn't need to explain further. Lydia's breath caught in her throat, and then, like a dam breaking, she started crying. Marla tried to talk over me, but I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I just laid it out. "The truth isn't pretty," I said, looking at Douglas, then at the crowd. "You've been bleeding money, but let's get into the details. Declining unit sales, ballooning floor plan interest, risk to the franchise. And then there's Sloan's little consultant scheme, $382,400 funneled through over the years." Victor stepped forward then, calm and measured. He held a folder labeled by quarter, each page a little more damning than the last. He slid it over to the manufacturer rep, who took it without a word. He flipped through the pages, jaw tightening, eyes scanning the evidence. Douglas looked like he was shrinking in his tux, each page like another weight pressing on his shoulders. Marla tried again. "This is slander. You don't know what you're talking about? There are legal consequences. Her voice trembled, but I didn't flinch. I gave her a flat look. Everything's documented. Everything's legal. Public filings, vendor statements, bank summaries tied to expense codes. I've already given mirrored copies to counsel, and if I need to, I'll take it to the press. I pulled the ring from my pocket, the one I'd kept hidden until now. It was heavy in my hand, colder than it had ever felt before. I won't marry into a lie. I laid it down on the lectern, right in front of Lydia. You decide who you are without your mother's script. Good luck. I didn't wait for her to respond. Didn't need to. I turned, facing the crowd one last time. I wanted to make one last point. Your worth isn't your showroom, I said, my voice steady. It's how you treat the guy you think can't buy a car here. I stepped down from the stage, the weight of their eyes heavy on my back. Phones started buzzing in the crowd. The whispers began, growing louder. A tidal wave of texts, notifications, and calls. They all knew what I had done, what it meant. But it wasn't about them anymore. It was about what came next. What I had already set in motion. I didn't look back as I walked toward the door. The Pendletons were still trapped in their game, but I wasn't playing anymore. Outside the tent, you could feel the center snap. I didn't need to be inside to hear it. The rep was on the phone, his voice low and urgent, the kind of tone people use when they're realizing the damage is real. A journalist was scribbling furiously in a notebook, his eyes darting between pages in the crowd, like he was making sure he didn't miss anything. Two dealers I recognized from the filings were already making their way to the exit, heads down, slipping away early to avoid the fallout. Inside, the real chaos was just starting. I caught Sloane in the corner by the bar, waving her hands, her voice rising like she was trying to argue her way out of it. Her husband was standing there, the color drained from his face, staring at the folder like it was a verdict. Douglas was sitting at a table, his head down, shoulders sagging as if the weight of it all had finally broken him. I could almost feel the air shift with the pressure of everything unraveling. Marla was trying to pull herself together. I could see her pushing her way back to the mic, desperate for some control, but nobody was listening anymore. Her voice rang out, but it was a weak attempt. "This is slander!" she shouted, but it wasn't enough to stop the tide. A couple of the sponsors had already started heading for the exits, tight smiles on their faces as they turned their backs, slipping away to avoid getting caught in the mess. Victor found me by the hedge, his steps quick but steady, like he was eager to get out of the line of fire. "The rep's filing a notice," he said, his voice quieter now, a little lighter. The tension in him had eased, and I could tell he was relieved the worst of it was over. We shook hands, a brief, firm gesture. No hard feelings, just facts. Lydia was still inside, but she came out soon enough. I saw her through the flap of the tent. Mascara streaked down her cheeks, her face pale. She walked toward me, hesitant, like she wasn't sure what she was going to say. "I was under pressure, Curtis," she said, her voice cracking a little. "Evan, it was only business. It wasn't like you think." I looked at her, really looked at her, and I felt something click into place. "Business has a way of showing your heart," I said, keeping my voice steady. "You made your choices. You knew exactly what you were doing." She flinched, but she didn't argue. I didn't need her to. I turned and walked back to the valet, who handed me my key like he wasn't sure whether I was the man who had just wrecked the whole evening, or someone who'd been through it just to watch it all burn. I didn't care. I climbed into the Tacoma, letting the engine hum to life, the weight of the night still sitting heavy on me, but I felt lighter somehow. I drove down that long driveway, the same driveway where they had all been playing their game. The sky above me was still. No storms, no dramatic shifts. Just the kind of evening that didn't care about last names, or who thought they were untouchable. It felt like the right kind of quiet, the kind that followed a real ending. I didn't look back. A week later, I sat at my kitchen table, the usual black coffee in front of me. The morning light was soft through the blinds, just the kind of quiet moment that made it easy to think. And then the alert came through, a headline flashing across my phone. Pendleton Auto to lose franchise. Internal review cites financial irregularities. I scanned the article quickly. It was careful with its words, too careful. But anyone who knew the business could read between the lines. The inventory would dry up now that they were losing the franchise. The ship would go down slow, and it was already sinking. The piece mentioned Sloane, stepping aside, pending review. A nice way of saying she was out, whether they said it or not. Vendors were disputing charges. The manufacturer was tightening compliance. The article didn't mention my name. It didn't need to. I'd done my part. Lydia's name didn't come up either, but I knew what was coming next. I'd been expecting it. That afternoon, my phone buzzed twice with her texts. "We should talk." And "You don't understand the pressure I was under." I didn't even hesitate. I deleted both messages, my thumb quick, clean. I wasn't angry. I wasn't anything. I just couldn't waste any more time on her or her excuses. I turned back to the work order on the table in front of me. A wastewater plant retrofit. The kind of project that had no room for games, no room for pretending. Real work, clear scope. People who knew what they were doing and got paid to do it right. That night, I held my grandfather's signet ring for a second, turning it between my fingers. It was cold in my hand, but it felt steady, like a part of him was still there. I thought about how he'd smile, that crooked grin of his, and say, "If a person thinks you're nobody, let them show you exactly who they are." I didn't feel triumphant, not really. More like steady, like I'd helped the truth find daylight. And now it could take care of itself. The rest was theirs to handle, hearings, lawyers, whatever came when the shine wore off. That wasn't my business anymore. I drove the Tacoma slow that evening, stopping for a burger at a place with paper napkins. A dad was fixing a bike tube for his kid in the parking lot. And for some reason, that was the picture I wanted to hold on to. Simple, real, no high stakes, no drama, just something good and honest happening on a regular Tuesday night. It felt like the right kind of rich. Back home, I answered emails from a small city that wanted automation upgrades on their water plant. Real work, the kind I knew how to handle, no expectations, just problems to solve, people shaking hands because they meant it. Before bed, my phone buzzed again. An unknown number? I checked it. It was Evan. Something snide about winning tonight. I didn't respond. I silenced the phone and set it on the counter, letting it go dark. Some doors, once shut, stay shut. I slept fine. The kind of sleep you get when you've done everything you need to, and there's nothing left to prove.